There are 5 different songs competing for one single spot in the final of Eurovision next month. These range from Nightcore-esque tributes to dead space dogs, to traditional folk songs, to a man named Parg that everyone on my Discord server has nicknamed Garg because he kind of looks like me. Personally, I don't see it. In the eyes of the betting odds, these songs have all a roughly equivalent chance of making it to the final. The problem is, there is only space for one. Today, we are going to go through what is shaping up to be one of the most competitive battles for a single final spot that we've seen in several years. I'm going to give you some idea of how each of these countries can make it into that final spot, as well as who I think is the favourite to do it. Quickly before we start with the aforementioned Garg, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well if you enjoy it, and you can find all of my socials in the description. As well as that, you can also find details on how to support the channel financially. Without further ado, let's look at the 5 players in this fight to the death. The first one is Parg. He's representing Armenia with his song Survivor. I'm a survivor. Poor Parg has been on the end of quite a few jokes on this channel, ranging from the quality of the national final performance to some of the lyrics of his song. That said, we've talked enough about I'm a Survivor, Stay Alive, I'm in my zone in past videos, so today I'm going to try and look at it in a more positive light. Let's talk about the potential strengths and try and plot out this route to the final. This is a pretty bombastic song, and it's kind of rock adjacent, much in the way that Imagine Dragons was in the mid-2010s. It's not necessarily up my alley, and I was initially very pessimistic. But because of the indicators that we've had since that national final performance, I think we can increasingly put that to one side and look at the newer information that's more relevant. The first and biggest one here is just how many people have been surprised by this song's performance at the Eurovision pre-parties. There were low expectations from Parg going into this, but in general, people seem to have been pretty impressed. With a better production here, it immediately sounded much better, and the same will probably be true in Basel as well. In addition, there aren't really any other rock songs in this semi-final, so it stands out. That gives it a distinct and clear group of voters that nobody else is really catering to. If this can impress them enough, then we might see it go through on the back of them. As a performer as well, Parg does have a lot of energy and a lot of charisma. I'm not sure that that alone is going to sell the rap part of this song live completely, or otherwise shed the slightly bizarre energy about the entire thing. That said, it does make it a lot more likely than it otherwise would be. Perhaps most importantly, Armenia has the only 2 countries that gave them 12 points in the semi-final last year in with them this year as well. Those are Israel and Georgia. While 12s from those countries do look unlikely this year, it will give them a big boost. We're going to have a look at the effect of voting allies for all of the songs once we've introduced each of them. Make sure to stay tuned for that. The next contender to introduce here is Denmark, in the form of Sissal with her song Hallucination. This is the first of 2 woman-led pop songs in this video, and it's probably the one I listen to the most. It's also absolute kryptonite for anyone who loved Je ne sais quoi by Hera Björk. That song finished 3rd in its semi-final in 2010, and if we were in Eurovision 2010 now, Sissal would probably be looking at a similar result. This may be a scary thing to say to a certain group of Eurofans, but it is in fact not 2010 anymore. Tastes have moved on a little bit since then. Luckily for Sissal, the danger of this sounding dated is offset to an extent by the fact that this is a pretty strong example of this style, and it's performed really well too. Another factor in Sissal's favour is that she has essentially adopted a PR approach for the contest of maximum chaos. This has included increasingly unhinged Instagram streams with other participants, posting TikToks ostensibly about her nails but clearly with another focus, and roasting herself, her own staging, and her own broadcaster.
Yes, girl, give us absolutely nothing. Give us nothing.
It is actually very helpful to her as well that she's self-aware about what the staging was like at the national final, because as she knows and agrees, it really wasn't good. Basically everything about it needed changing, whether it was the moving floor she's walking on for no reason, the wind machine blowing hair into her face, or the leotard that really doesn't flatter her. This needed a rethink from the ground up, and it's really good that she knew that too. At the same time, we're gonna struggle to shake off the fact that this is simply something that's been done at Eurovision many times before. While that isn't a fatal fatal challenge, it raises the bar on every single front. That's because you're not just competing against the people who are in the semi-final with you, you're going to be compared against the great and most famous examples of this kind of music from contests in the past. I mentioned Hera Björk as an example of this done well, but there are just as many examples of it going badly wrong. I'm looking at you, Cascada. To be honest, I'm kind of not surprised that it was Germany that was the one who really screwed it up. With this kind of music, you also run the risk of being seen as a kind of Sweden light. And if everyone turns around and starts comparing you to the likes of Loreen, all of a sudden you're in massive trouble. All of this in mind, I don't want to oversell it as a factor, because ultimately, if people enjoy the song, they're going to vote for it. The best way to ensure that is by delivering a great live performance. Sissal has done that at pre-parties so far, and it's no surprise that her odds improved after Eurovision in concert last weekend. There are some building blocks here, and things do seem to be coming together and going in the right direction. For Sissal's sake, I hope that continues. Next, we're going to the complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of style of music. That's in the form of Latvia. This year, they've chosen 2025's with their song Bo man laimi. This emerged from a pretty extraordinary three-way tie in the national final and has come straight into another equally massive slugfest here. This is the most pure folk song of anything at the contest this year, and it's picked up the mantle of Baltic folk music that was laid down last year by Nendes Narkotikumides Etemi Kulmidagi. No, I will never miss an opportunity to say that. This has a few things in its favour and a few things holding it back. The biggest mark in its favour is that both visually and musically, this is totally distinct, not just from anything in the semi-final, but from anything else in the contest this year. If folk is your thing, you're probably going to enjoy this. And if you don't enjoy it, then tough luck, because there's nothing else that's going to fill your cup on this one. This is a risk and reward that's quite difficult to balance out. You want something that is distinct and unique enough to really stand out. And in this case, this absolutely does. But at the same time, you need to simultaneously maintain enough accessibility that you have a wide enough base of people who are willing to pick up their phone and vote for it. This is especially difficult for folk music because it has a narrower audience than, for example, a pop song. For me personally, and I will admit my bias as someone who does really enjoy folk music, I love this. I think the instrumentation is really beautiful, and I think that the singers' voices are absolutely stunning. I don't know how much the wider European public are going to agree with me though. In particular, the sections of this that have really intricate harmonies and rhythms start sounding muddy immediately if anything is even ever so slightly out of sync. That means you have a much thinner margin of error than some of the other songs that I'm talking about in this video. What I really fear is if it doesn't come together live, it'll lose its potential impact and fall well away from qualification as a result. I am influenced here by a similar situation with Tulia from Poland in 2019, not in the senses of the performance, but of the style of music. They finished 11th in the semi-final overall and missed out on the final by a whisker. That said, you could maybe look to some more positive examples as well, such as Vesna from the Czech Republic in 2023, although in my opinion that was a much stronger song. We also should remember, of course, that Latvia did qualify last year when absolutely nobody expected them to. Next up is a song that we've covered on this channel before, and that is Serbia. For them, it's Prince with his song Mila. There is a full video on this channel about the cloud of controversy from which this entry emerged this year. In the midst of that controversy and rigging and government corruption, we got this. A pretty uninteresting Balkan ballad that fell out of fashion at the contest many years ago. We've talked about this at length, so I'm going to keep it brief here. Prince is a very good singer, and there is genuinely still an audience for this kind of song, especially among diaspora communities. And that's what hands this its big lifeline. It does also have a potential problem in this regard, but we'll get onto that in a minute. The thing that really brings this down is that it's just quite kitsch, not really remarkable as a song, and as a result, it's not hugely memorable either. In addition to that, this kind of music was much more successful in the contest when it had more Balkan countries in the contest to respond to it. We have no North Macedonia and no Bosnia and no Bulgaria now. Those are three big potential markets for which this cannot access. This massively compromises its starting position in terms of how many points it can count on for sure. In his favour, he does have the king of all Balkan ballads, Zeljko Joksimovic, working with him on the revamp. And he does have a decent running order spot, at least on paper. That said, there are some complications to that too as well. We are going to come to that in a moment. For now though, Prince is on pretty unsteady ground. Our final contender here is another one that we've talked about at length on this channel before, and that's Ireland. For them, it's Emmy, and she's representing them with her song Like a Party. At the time of filming, this is the song that the bookmakers have marginally in the top 10 to qualify. As well as that, there are a couple of statistical models out there that both have this qualifying too. Gabe from the future here, it was actually only one statistical model. After Irish Eurosong, which of course I went to, and there's a full video about that on this channel, I was generally pretty optimistic about Emmy's chances at the contest. While I do think there's still a really good chance of this making it to the final, my optimism has cooled a little bit since then. The fundamental quality of the song hasn't changed here, it's more the factors around it that have led me to be a little bit unsure about what we're going to get. One thing that's definitely in their favor is that this has the catchiest hook, not just of these 5 songs, but possibly of the entire show. Unfortunately for now, the main issue is Emmy's performance. This has, like with some other songs, become clearer in the last couple of weeks thanks to the pre-parties. I'm not worried about her vocal, which seems to be mostly fine, but I do fear that she's struggling to fill the stage slightly. As a result, she's not fully selling the song. This is probably at least partly nerves, and that is naturally going to make you deliver a less charismatic performance. I just really hope that as we approach the contest, that starts to fade away. This is so important in this case because you cannot sell a song like this without being 100% confident. If you show any doubt in the message or the slightly comic nature of it, then people just won't connect. In addition to that, the visuals really need a change up too, because the graphic design we've seen so far at both Eurosong and at Eurovision in concert just isn't at the level it needs to be for Eurovision. I have a bit of personal investment in this one, to be honest, having seen Emmy get selected and bought her and her brother their first ever shots of baby Guinness. For that reason, I'm glad to be able to at least finish on a positive here, and that is really re-emphasizing the fact that the hook of this song is just so catchy. You really can't underestimate the effect that alone will have. And if this burns into people's brains enough, then that alone could raise it above all the rest of the songs in this video, even if the performance doesn't quite come together. That alone is probably why this is the one sitting at 10th in the odds at the moment. With that, we've laid out the 5 songs, and we're going to need to dig a little bit deeper to try and work out which of them is going to qualify. There is a wild card here, which is that if Luxembourg slips up badly, it could allow 2 of these through. Or if all of them are terrible at the show, it could open a door for Montenegro. But given what we've already seen, I'm not seeing that as particularly likely. What we're going to do now is we are going to try and plot a path to the final by trying to work out where the points would come from. To set out some parameters, I'm operating on the assumption here that you're going to need 40 to 45 points to qualify. That's where we were for both semi-finals in 2024, and in one semi-final in 2023, 10th place qualified with 37. In semi-final 2 in 2023, the bar was way higher, because the 10th placed song got 74 points. But that's an outlier, and when you have 14 songs that are competitive for the final, you're not likely to end up in a position like this. The first thing we're going to look at is the reliable friends, the countries that each of these acts can rely on to give them a good amount of points in every case. To try and avoid this effect being too strong, the contest does split the countries into pots based on past voting patterns, but it still varies a lot based on who from your pot is in your semi-final with you. A good example of this is last year, where Serbia, Slovenia and Croatia being in the same pot massively benefited all of them. Serbia got 22 points from Croatia and Slovenia got 20 points from Croatia and Serbia. That effect alone is probably why these two qualified and Australia couldn't nip in between the two of them. On the flip side, you also have Armenia and Azerbaijan in the same pot. They would not want to be drawn in a semi-final together because there's no chance of them giving each other points. In this particular case, Armenia is actually a pretty big winner. That's because they have both Georgia and Israel in the semi-final. Those were the only 2 countries that gave them 12 points in the semi-final last year. They're probably not going to get 24 combined from these 2, but they might get a decent haul that gives them a head start. Most of the other songs here have reasons to be optimistic too. Serbia is probably a nailed-on 12 points from Montenegro, or at the very least 8 or 10. That said, they'll be really regretting that they've gotten Austria when they could have had Slovenia or Croatia. There are some silver linings here though, because Austria does still give Serbia points fairly regularly. They have Germany there too, which was a decent friend of theirs in the semi-final last year, and the rest of the world vote in the last 2 years in the semi-finals has always given points to Serbia, Croatia and Slovenia. Latvia is in a similar, if slightly weaker position. That's because they do have one big advantage in the form of Lithuania. This is their closest linguistic and cultural match. Unfortunately, they could have had Estonia as well, but they don't. That is probably probably an 8 or a 10 lost. Ireland have a few reasons to be optimistic as well. Firstly, that's because they have their biggest televote friend in the form of the UK voting in this semi-final. Outside of that, they would have really wanted Australia as well, and Australia is what they got. Other than that, there's only one other natural friend for this, and that is Norway. That's because Emmy is Norwegian. Unfortunately for them, Norway is in the other semi-final. That said, having two friendly countries is a pretty good start. Another song that is going to suffer from the absence of Norway is Denmark. But the biggest blow here is not having Sweden. When you look at this pot, getting Finland and Australia would probably be their last choice. On this front, the draw has basically done Sisal no favours whatsoever. When you take the effects of cultural and friendly voting into account, it's clear that Sisal is going to have to perform significantly better in general than the rest of the songs here in order to qualify. Next, I want to take a look at the running order. This is nowhere near as important in the semi-finals as it is in the finals, but it's still worth a mention. 3 of these 5 songs actually follow each other in a direct run from position 3 to position 5. I would say this is a decent enough draw for all of them. They stand out stylistically from each other and from the songs that are at either end. For that reason, it's probably roughly a net neutral effect. Denmark, on the other hand, finally has something to celebrate here. They have the strongest running order slot that they could have possibly asked for. They have the weakest song in the semi-final in the form of Georgia directly before them. In addition to that, they have another ballad, although a very strong one, immediately after in the form of the Czechs. What this means is that Sisal will really have the opportunity to shine, and it opens the door for her to get those extra points that she needs. The final one is the most difficult to judge, and that is Serbia. On paper, performing second to last is fantastic and the best slot you could ask for. That said, that impression changes quite a lot when you look at what is next to them. To be blunt, they have the 2 songs that I expect to finish first and second in the semi-final immediately before and immediately after them in the form of Israel and Finland. I don't really know in which order those 2 are going to be, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be at the top. Being in that sandwich is a great way for everyone to forget that you exist. Because of that, this running order is probably overall a net negative for them. The next factor to mention is the effect of songs that are in direct competition for the same voters with these 5. Armenia and Latvia look really good in this respect because there is nothing that approaches their style of music in the rest of the show. The same can't be said for Denmark and Ireland. While these 2 songs are quite different styles of pop, both of them are competing for voters with Erika Vikman, Miriana Conte and Gojo, and that makes things significantly more difficult for both of them. There is a silver lining here for Ireland. That is that the nightcore style of this is genuinely different to everything else we have in the show. That might mobilize a pool of voters that those other songs can't access. The big loser though in this respect is Serbia. Serbia and Montenegro are competing for the same voters, including in the diasporas, with very similar styles of songs. That could prove fatal to both of their chances. Finally, you have a pure televote appeal. What is going to be memorable and what makes people want to pick up their phones and vote? This is probably the most subjective part of this, and the part where we basically have to just use our own judgment. Given how catchy Ireland's song is, that is where I think the most raw potential is. That's not to say that other songs won't have potential too. I think Denmark and Armenia have a strong shot here, and Armenia, being in its own lane with no other rock songs, could really excel as well. Latvia will have a small but hopefully quite passionate segment of fans, which could put them in that conversation as well. Finally, Serbia, as I mentioned, is facing a bit of a crisis here, as well as just not being that interesting or new of a song. Because of that, it's fishing in a small pond with a spoiler in the form of Montenegro, making everything twice as difficult. I have thrown a lot of factors out on the table there very quickly, which illustrates how close it's going to be, and how every single one of these songs has an argument to say that it will qualify. That said, I'm going to quickly summarize each one just to try and make it make a little bit more sense. So here is how each of these songs could make it to the grand final. For Armenia, it's by picking up rock-aligned voters and springboarding from 2 strong televoting allies in the form of Georgia and Israel. For Serbia, it's getting a 12 points from Montenegro, as well as decent results in Germany, Austria, and the rest of the world. That would leave them only needing to pick up scraps from the rest of the participating countries, but they really must deliver strong results in those 4 I just mentioned. For Denmark, the challenge is a little different. This is a cleanly produced pop song, so it has really broad appeal. That said, it needs to be picking up points almost everywhere. 2s, 3s, and 4s. Let's not forget, if you pick up 3 points on average from every voter in this semi-final, you'd end up with almost 60, and that would see you through comfortably. equally. For Latvia, it's a 10 or a 12 from Lithuania, and nothing else will do here. That needs to be combined with viewers tuning in who are favourable to folk music, and then delivering for them in a big way. For Ireland, it's a similar path to Denmark. They need low to medium scores from a broad base of countries. That said, the bonus of the UK and Australia both being in this semi makes that job a little bit easier. Now we've reached this point, I think it's only fair for me to give you a prediction in order of likelihood of who I think is going to qualify. I'm going to do that from the least likely to the most. That least likely this year, I think, is Serbia, purely down to that lack of appeal more generally and the fact they're splitting votes with Montenegro. I think Latvia is the second least likely, Denmark in the middle, Armenia is second, and finally, Ireland is the most. That's delivered on the back of that really catchy hook I was talking about earlier. I could be proved totally wrong or totally right on this front, but no matter what happens, I will come back and own this, and we will talk about this after the shows take place. For now though, we have reached the end of our review of what is shaping up to be a photo finish for that final place in the final. Thank you so much for watching as always, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. Next week, we're taking on something enormous and terrifying in the form of a tier list of every single one of this year's Eurovision songs. You will not want to miss that, so make sure to subscribe as I said. In the meantime, take care, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in 7 days' time.